Today's video is going to show you how to remove the front tubular frame of a Meyers snowplow from the subframe that mounts onto the truck. So what you're seeing right here, if you're looking at this video, you know what you're looking at. You're wondering how to get this piece of the frame out of this piece of the frame. Common problem that those get rusted as one unit, and I bought this plow from a guy. He's probably 10 or 15 years old. It was rusted as one. When I started looking online about other parts of the plow, I noticed a lot of guys were saying, hey, how the heck do you get these things apart? And so I'm just going to show you how I did it, which I think is a very effective way. First of all, for my application, I don't need the top of this subframe, so I torched this off because I'm not going to use this piece in my application. So I got that onto there. So now what you're looking at is, what you might see. I don't have this engaged all of the way right now because it's actually still a tight fit. I've had this thing apart, but this tubular subframe would be into the subframe to where these pins line up. The idea is, in the summer, you can take this frame off, leave this bolted to the truck, then you're not carrying your pump, and if you need to service the truck, this is out of the way. And that's what I intend to do, so that's why I wanted this to be able to be removable from here. So when I bought it, the guy said, yeah, that's rusted tight. You can see there's a crack here. He actually tried putting a chain on the thing and pulling it apart. There's absolutely no way that this comes apart once they're rust welded together. Again, this would be slid into here. Bunch of different ways online that people suggest. One of them is using WD-40 or PB Blaster, some kind of a lubricant to try and get in here into the back. I don't think that works because you have such a big area of tube. It's very tight and it's just full of rust. The other thing is that will not dissolve the rust, which is basically like concrete. So I don't think that stuff's going to work. Another way that guys say is to use heat. Heat this outer tube, which in fact, when you heat a tube, it will expand. The problem is these are so tight and there's so much surface area and so much rust in there that you would have to get both of these cherry red and then still somehow be able to apply a ton of force while you're working with something that's red hot and difficult to work with. The third way to do it, which is the way that I did it, involves slicing the tubes. What you see here is the only two tools that you need to do this job. You need a die grinder. It can either be air powered or an electric angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, a good sized ball peen hammer, and then a sledgehammer. What I did was I went along the top of the tube. You can't go to the bottom where it's welded to this frame. You need to be within this arc here so that you can actually cut all the way from one end to the other end. You have to cut this completely. Took the die grinder, sliced all the way across the tube. Once I got to the end where this piece was butted up here, I kind of had to chase off to the side. It's very important that you cut this tube completely. Same thing on the other side. Once you cut all the way through there, which is not an easy job, takes some time. Once you're sure that you're all the way through, then you take the ball peen hammer and you smack this tube on all surfaces all the way around it. You can kind of see on this one how it's got some dents. Use the flat side of the hammer, not the ball peen side, so you don't dent it. What that will do is that will crush the rust that is in there, reducing it to a powder. It'll kind of relax this tube. It'll open up. You can see the difference between the thickness of my cutoff wheel and the thickness of the groove because this tube has expanded. Not so much back here where it's welded, but out here the tube has opened up quite a bit. So you got to take 5 minutes per side and just pound every side of it. You'll see dust starting to come out, and that'll loosen this up. So that's step one. Step two. Step three then is to support the frame in such a way that you can hammer this piece off. What I did was I tipped this over and I laid a support against here. You need to have something super solid. I happen to have a forklift and I used forks under here so that this was being supported in a fashion such as this, straight up, and then I came and hit right here with the hammer, you can see there, and this side, which got pretty well deformed. The reason this side took so much more work is that I actually had not cut all the way through this tube. When you're cutting, it's very difficult to tell if you've cut through or not, and I had in fact not cut all the way through. However, it was enough. You know, this is not a major problem. I didn't deform any of the rest of the brackets or the metal. I can clean this up. I'm not real concerned about that. And so with several hard smacks, this thing then comes out of there, and you got your two pieces, which is what we're trying to get to. And even now, with it being cleaned up, this thing is still very tight. I don't know if I can get it off. The other thing is that you need to be hitting on both sides equally. If you hit one side, it'll just bind, and this will not come off of there. So it is not an easy piece to get off. Even now that I've had it off of there and it's cleaned, it's pretty difficult. And it will come off of there. So this one I've had apart. I've sandblasted it to clean it. There we go. I will paint it. One of the things you want to be careful of when you do this is that you don't cut too far into the other tubes. So here I had some overcutting, very minor. I'm going to weld up that crack. A little bit of overcut there. That was the side I didn't cut all the way through. So this piece is what you're getting after. So that's basically all set to go. This is the piece I'm going to weld onto the truck. I'll fix up my mess here. When I put this back together, I'm actually going to leave these tubes spread out a little bit so that I get an easier fit. Instead of putting pins through here, I'll use bolts. So I pinch it and it's not floating around in there. As long as you exercise, take this in and out twice a year, it's not going to freeze up. You can put some grease in there when you put it back together. Make sure it's clean in there, and then you can use it the way the factory intended. If you leave it in there for a couple years, it's going to rust itself in there and you'll be doing it again. So hopefully that led some insight. It took probably an hour. Just take your time, but this way there's no torching. Some guys will try to torch this. That's a very difficult cut. Not to destroy this. If you're throwing this away, you can do that, but again, you don't want to cut into the other frame. And when you're cutting into rust, the sparks and the molten metal go flying everywhere. That's a messy job. If you are saving it, this gives you a nice groove. You can either weld this gap, or what I'll do is put a patch over the top of it so that I can keep this increased size, and it'll help me out. But all of the orientation has stayed correct. This is the piece I'm going to mount onto my truck with some additional supports, which is basically the way the factory intended it, except for the top piece on the bumper, and I'll be back in business. So hopefully that helps out one or two of you guys, and good luck snow plowing.